Um, I think it's I think it's interesting to see how everyone's changed and how we've all grown up.
Lisa Bonet has always lived a life that doesn't follow the usual rules of fame. From early success on television to years of stepping back from the spotlight, she's made choices that often left people guessing. But in recent years, after her separation from Jason Momoa, something shifted again. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a way that caught attention for all the quiet reasons. Join us as we take a closer look at Lisa Bonet's journey and the changes that are making people pay attention once again. Early displacement. Lisa Bonet was born in San Francisco, but her early life took shape in Los Angeles, where she was raised after her parents separated. That shift placed her in an environment that looked comfortable on the surface but felt complicated underneath. She grew up in a neighborhood that was wealthy and mostly white, which made her stand out in ways she could not ignore. From a young age, she became aware that her background did not fully match the world around her. Being mixed race added another layer to that feeling. It was not just about how others saw her, but also how she saw herself. She did not feel fully connected to any one group, and that created questions she had to work through on her own. There was no clear sense of belonging, and that stayed with her as she got older. Instead of finding easy answers, she learned to sit with that uncertainty. Her parents' divorce also played a strong role in shaping her early years. As an only child, she did not have siblings to share that experience with. Much of her time was spent alone, which gave her space to think, but also made her feel isolated. That kind of loneliness can be difficult for a child, but in her case, it pushed her inward. She began to rely on herself for comfort and understanding, which slowly built a strong sense of independence. This independence did not come from confidence at first. It came from having no other option. She had to figure out who she was without constant guidance or reassurance. Over time, that turned into a quiet strength. She became comfortable being different, even if it meant standing apart. Instead of trying to fully fit into one identity, she allowed herself to exist in between. That early sense of not belonging to one clear world followed her into adulthood. It influenced how she approached relationships, work, and public life. She did not feel the need to fully adapt to expectations because she had already spent years learning how to exist outside of them. The loneliness she experienced as a child did not disappear, but it changed form. It became something she understood and managed, rather than something that controlled her. These early experiences did not just shape her personality, they set the foundation for the choices she would later make. And soon, that search for belonging would lead her somewhere unexpected. An accidental entry. Lisa Bonet did not grow up planning to become an actress. Her entry into acting happened in a simple and unexpected way. A friend invited her to join an acting class, and she went along without any big expectations. At that point in her life, she was still trying to understand where she fit in. The class gave her something she had not felt before. It gave her a space where being different was not a problem. Instead, it was accepted. For the first time, she felt comfortable expressing herself without worrying about how she would be judged. Acting allowed her to explore different sides of herself while still feeling in control. That experience stayed with her and gave her a reason to continue. What started as a casual decision slowly became something more meaningful. Not long after, she got her first small role on St. Elsewhere while she was still in school. It was a brief appearance, but it showed that she had potential. It also introduced her to the professional side of the industry. Soon after that, she went to an audition that would completely change her life. At just 16 years old, she was cast as Denise Huxtable on The Cosby Show. The show quickly became one of the most watched programs in the country. Almost overnight, Lisa went from being a regular teenager to a well-known face across America. The shift was fast and intense. She was still growing up, but now she was doing it in front of millions of viewers. Denise Huxtable became more than just a character. She became a symbol. Her style, confidence, and personality stood out, and many young people looked up to her. Denise became a fashion icon, known for her bold and unique choices. People admired her individuality, but that attention also came with pressure. While the public loved Denise, Lisa did not always feel comfortable with that level of attention. Fame brought expectations that she did not ask for. People began to connect her real identity with the character she played, and that made it harder for her to separate herself from the role. She was expected to represent a certain image, even when it did not match who she truly was. Even at that young age, she seemed aware that fame could limit her if she let it define her. Instead of fully embracing the spotlight, she remained slightly distant from it. She showed signs early on that she would not easily fit into the role others created for her. That tension between public image and personal identity was only beginning to grow. And soon, she would make a decision that would shock everyone watching her. First, major break. As Lisa Bonet continued working on The Cosby Show, a quiet tension began to grow inside her. On screen, she played Denise Huxtable, a confident and stylish young woman who became widely admired. Off-screen, Lisa was still figuring out who she really was. The more popular the show became, the more people expected her to stay connected to that image. Over time, that expectation started to feel limiting. She understood something early that many actors only realize later. Television fame can be powerful, but it can also put people in a box. Once an actor becomes strongly linked to one character, it becomes harder for audiences and producers to see them in a different way. Lisa was still very young, but she was already thinking about her future. She did not want to spend her entire career repeating the same role in different forms. That awareness pushed her to make a bold decision. She accepted a role in Angel Heart, a film that was completely different from anything people had seen her do before. The movie had darker themes, more complex emotions, and scenes that were far more mature than her television work. It was a clear break from the image of Denise Huxtable. When the film was released, the reaction was immediate and intense. Many people were shocked. Instead of focusing on the story or her performance, much of the attention went to how different she appeared. Headlines focused on the contrast between her past role and this new one. Some critics accused her of damaging the wholesome image that audiences had connected to her. The backlash was not small, and it could have easily pushed her to step back or explain herself in a way that would calm the public. But Lisa chose a different approach. She did not apologize for taking the role. She did not describe it as a mistake or try to soften the decision. Instead, she spoke openly about wanting to grow as an actress and take her work seriously. She made it clear that her responsibility was to herself, not to a character she once played. That mindset was unusual, especially for someone so young and under so much public attention. Many actors in her position might have tried to protect their image, but she was more focused on staying true to her own path. This moment set the tone for what would follow in her career. She showed early on that she would not let approval guide her choices. Even when the reaction was harsh, she stayed consistent with her values. And that choice would soon create even bigger challenges behind the scenes. A forced separation. After her rising fame on The Cosby Show, Lisa Bonet was given a new opportunity that seemed like a natural next step. Her character, Denise Huxtable, became the center of a spin-off series called A Different World. The show focused on college life and was expected to carry forward the popularity she had already built. When it first launched, it drew strong attention and looked like another major success in her career. But behind the scenes, things were not as smooth as they appeared. By this time, Lisa's personal life was beginning to move in a direction that did not match the structure of the show. She was growing, changing, and making decisions based on her real life, not the expectations placed on her character. This created tension between her and the production team, who needed consistency for the storyline. The situation became more complicated when she became pregnant. At that time, television shows were much more controlled in how they presented characters, especially female leads. There were discussions about whether her pregnancy could be written into the story. Some saw it as a chance to show a more realistic and honest version of a young woman's life. Others felt it did not fit the image they wanted to maintain. In the end, the decision was not flexible. The production did not adjust to her reality. Instead, she was expected to separate her personal life from her professional role in a way that did not feel right to her. Lisa chose not to conform to those demands. That decision led to her stepping away from the show she had helped bring to life. Once she left, the public narrative quickly turned against her. Media reports often described her as difficult or hard to work with. These labels spread easily, especially in an industry that often expects young actors to follow direction without question. What was not fully acknowledged at the time was her age and the pressure she was under. She was barely out of her teenage years, dealing with major life changes while being watched closely by the public. This moment marked a clear break between Lisa and the system she had been part of. The gap between what Hollywood expected and what she was willing to accept became impossible to ignore. She was no longer trying to fit into a structure that did not reflect her reality. That distance would only grow stronger as her life began to shift in a completely new direction. And soon, she would step even further away from the spotlight to focus on something more personal. Motherhood and withdrawal. The birth of Zoe Kravitz marked a major turning point in the life of Lisa Bonet. Motherhood did not arrive quietly or in the background. It changed how she saw her time, her work, and her priorities. Up to that point, her career had moved quickly, shaped by television success and public attention. But once her daughter was born, that pace no longer felt right to her. Instead of focusing on maintaining momentum in Hollywood, Lisa chose to slow down. This was not because opportunities disappeared, but because her focus shifted. She wanted to be present for her child and understand her role as a mother without distractions. That decision stood in contrast to an industry that often rewards constant visibility and output. Around the same time, her relationship with Lenny Kravitz became a central part of her life. Their marriage drew strong public attention. Both were young, creative, and highly visible, which made their relationship a constant topic in the media. While there was real connection and admiration between them, living under that level of attention brought pressure. When their marriage eventually ended, it was not treated as a quiet, personal matter. It carried emotional weight, especially because it unfolded in the public eye. Lenny later spoke about how difficult that period was for him, describing it as painful and exhausting. For Lisa, the separation was another moment that required her to step back and reorganize her life. After the split, she made a choice that reflected her need for distance from Hollywood. She moved to Topanga Canyon with her daughter. This was not just a change of location, but a shift in lifestyle. The environment there was calmer, more connected to nature, and far removed from the constant activity of the entertainment industry. In Topanga Canyon, Lisa created a home that focused on stability and simplicity. She surrounded herself with nature, animals, and a slower daily rhythm. This allowed her to raise her daughter in a space that felt grounded rather than performative. It also gave her room to think about who she was outside of fame. During this time, her absence from major projects led some people to assume she had stepped away completely. In reality, she was making intentional choices about how she wanted to live. She was no longer interested in meeting expectations that did not align with her values. This period helped her build a life that felt more honest and controlled on her own terms. And soon, she would take that sense of control even further in a way few expected. A reinvention. After stepping away from the fast pace of Hollywood, Lisa Bonet made a decision that reflected a deeper shift happening in her life. She legally changed her name to Lila Koi Moon. This was not done for attention or publicity. It was a personal choice that allowed her to separate her private identity from the public image attached to her original name. For her, it created space to exist outside of expectations that had followed her since her teenage years. During this period, her reduced presence in films and television led many people to assume that her career was fading. From the outside, it looked like she had stepped away without a clear reason. But that view missed what was actually happening. Lisa was not disappearing. She was choosing a different pace and redefining what mattered to her. She no longer measured success by visibility or recognition. Her focus turned inward. She spent time on introspection, trying to better understand herself without outside influence. Practices like yoga became part of her daily life, not as a trend, but as a way to stay grounded and connected to her body. She also explored alternative ways of living that felt more aligned with her values. These choices were quiet and consistent, not something she felt the need to explain publicly. Parenting remained at the center of her life. As Zoe Kravitz grew older, Lisa continued to support her independence. She allowed her daughter to make her own choices, even when those choices were not easy. At one point, Zoe chose to live with her father, Lenny Kravitz, for a period of time. Lisa respected that decision, even though it came with emotional difficulty. It showed her commitment to letting her child grow into her own person rather than holding on out of comfort. What stands out during this time is how Lisa built a life without seeking approval. She was not trying to return to the spotlight or reshape how people saw her. Instead, she focused on living in a way that felt honest. Her sense of autonomy became stronger because it was not dependent on outside validation. This phase of her life was not about starting over in a visible way. It was about reclaiming control quietly and fully. She defined her identity on her own terms and kept that process private. And just as she settled into that life, a new relationship began to take shape. A quiet love story. The relationship between Lisa Bonet and Jason Momoa did not begin with public attention or media interest. They first met in a jazz club in Los Angeles, long before Jason became widely known. At that time, he was still building his career, and she had already experienced both fame and distance from it. Their connection started in a simple and quiet way, without the pressure that often surrounds well-known figures. What shaped their relationship most was timing. Lisa had already gone through major life changes. She had stepped away from the industry's fast pace and built a life centered on stability and privacy. Jason, on the other hand, was still moving toward greater recognition. This difference did not create conflict at the start. Instead, it gave their relationship a sense of balance. She brought calm and experience, while he brought openness and energy. Their emotional connection became the foundation of their bond. Lisa valued honesty and consistency, and Jason responded to that in a way that made her feel supported. He has spoken in interviews about how much he admired her, even before they met. But what kept them together was not admiration alone. It was the way they understood each other in daily life. Lisa had created a space where trust and routine mattered, and Jason fit into that space naturally. As their relationship grew, they formed a blended family that included Lenny Kravitz, Lisa's former partner. Instead of tension, there was mutual respect. Lenny and Jason developed a friendly connection, and together they created an environment that felt stable for their children. This dynamic stood out because it was not common, especially in the public eye. It showed a level of maturity and cooperation that people noticed. Their relationship remained mostly private as it developed. They did not rush to define it publicly or make large announcements. Over time, they built a life together that felt grounded. When they eventually got married, it reflected the same approach. The ceremony was low-key and personal, without the kind of attention many expected. From the outside, their union was often seen as strong and balanced. Many people viewed them as a couple who had found a way to maintain both love and independence. Lisa appeared settled, and Jason seemed fully committed to the life they were building together. For a while, it looked like everything had found its place. But over time, subtle changes began to shift that balance. Diverging lifestyles. As time passed, the relationship between Lisa Bonet and Jason Momoa began to change in ways that were not obvious from the outside. What once felt balanced slowly started to shift as their lives moved in different directions. There was no single moment that caused it. Instead, it happened gradually. Jason's career began to grow at a much faster pace. He took on larger roles, joined major film projects, and became a global name. With that success came long filming schedules, travel, and constant public attention. His work required him to be away from home for extended periods, often moving between locations and staying in the spotlight. His life became more demanding and unpredictable. At the same time, Lisa remained committed to the life she had built over the years. She valued stillness, routine, and privacy. Her daily life was centered around home, family, and personal well-being. She was not interested in returning to a fast-moving schedule or being constantly visible. That difference in lifestyle started to create distance between them. What made this situation different from many public breakups is that there was no visible conflict. There were no public arguments or dramatic events. Instead, there was a quiet misalignment. The things that once worked between them no longer fit as easily. Their needs and priorities were no longer moving in the same direction. In relationships, some differences can be adjusted over time. But when those differences are tied to core values, compromise becomes harder. Jason's life was expanding outward, filled with new opportunities and constant change. Lisa's life was moving inward, focused on stability and consistency. Neither approach was wrong, but they were not fully compatible anymore. Rather than forcing a solution, they began to accept that the gap between them was growing. This acceptance did not happen publicly. It was something they worked through in private, away from attention. By the time the world learned about their separation, the emotional process had already taken place. Their decision to separate was not rushed. It reflected time, thought, and understanding. They had already begun living apart in certain ways before making any announcement. This allowed them to handle the situation with care rather than reaction. From the outside, their relationship had seemed steady and complete. But internally, it had already shifted into something different. And when the separation finally became public, Lisa responded in a way few people expected. Post-separation. When the separation between Lisa Bonet and Jason Momoa was finally made public, It did not come as a sudden decision in her life. By that point, the emotional work had already been done in private. They had taken time to understand the shift in their relationship before sharing it with the world. This meant that, for Lisa, the announcement was not the beginning of a new phase. It was simply the moment when others became aware of what she had already accepted. What stood out immediately was her response. There was no media tour, no detailed public explanation, and no attempt to control how the story was told. In a time when many public figures try to shape the narrative around personal changes, Lisa chose silence. She did not step forward to defend herself or offer her side in a polished way. Instead, she continued living as she had been, without adjusting her behavior for public attention. People close to her began to describe a noticeable shift. They spoke about her seeming lighter, more grounded, and more clear in her daily life. There was no sense of urgency or loss in how she moved forward. Rather than trying to replace what had ended, she appeared to accept it fully and move on without resistance. Her public appearances became even more limited. She did not return to acting projects or seek new roles to mark a comeback. This was not due to a lack of opportunity, but a reflection of her priorities. Over the years, she had built a level of financial independence that allowed her to make choices without pressure. She did not need to work for visibility or income, which gave her complete control over how she spent her time. That freedom showed in her daily routine. Her life was shaped by simple and consistent habits. She spent time outdoors, stayed connected to nature, and focused on movement through practices like yoga. Writing became another quiet outlet for expression. Most importantly, she remained deeply connected to her family, spending time with her children and those closest to her. There was no visible attempt to redefine herself after the separation. She did not change her image or present a new version of who she was. Instead, she stayed consistent with the life she had been building for years. And that quiet consistency would soon become the most talked about part of her transformation. A new transformation. After the separation, attention around Lisa Bonet shifted in a familiar way. Many people focused on her appearance, trying to read changes in her face, style, or overall look. There was constant discussion about how she looked at different public moments, as if her life could be explained through that alone. But Lisa herself showed very little interest in responding to any of it. She has long been open about her simple approach to self-care. Her focus has stayed on consistency rather than change. She avoids heavy procedures and prefers a minimal routine that supports her skin and body in a natural way. Over time, this approach has not changed. It is not based on trends or pressure from outside opinions. It is steady and personal. Another clear part of her life is her absence from social media. She does not share updates, post personal thoughts, or engage in public conversations about her life. This choice removes her from constant public feedback and allows her to live without reacting to outside judgment. It also means that most of what people know about her comes from rare appearances, not daily exposure. Movement and body awareness remain central to her routine. Practices like yoga and dance are not new habits for her. They have been part of her life for years. These activities help her stay connected to her body in a simple and consistent way. They are not used for performance or image, but for personal balance and focus. A similar approach can be seen in her daughter, Zoe Kravitz, who also handles public attention with a careful sense of distance. Both of them avoid over-explaining their choices and do not rely on public approval to define their paths. This shared attitude shows a pattern of quiet self-control within the family. Over time, the idea of reinvention has often been attached to Lisa's life story, but her reality does not match that label. There has been no dramatic shift in identity or sudden transformation. Instead, her life has developed through small, steady choices that stay consistent with her values. Growth, for her, is not about changing into someone new. It is about staying aligned with who she already is. Even her separation from Jason Momoa is not treated by her as a turning point that created change. It is more accurate to see it as something that revealed what was already true. The direction of her life did not suddenly shift after it. It simply continued along a path she had already been following. Today, her life is defined less by outside attention and more by internal balance. She does not adjust herself based on public reaction or expectations. Instead, she remains steady in her choices, her routines, and her way of living. And that steady way of living brings her story to a quiet but clear ending point. If you enjoyed this video, like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment with what part of her journey stood out to you most.